The scapular push. Failing to incorporate this into your pushing will overload your joints, lead to injury, and mean you don't reach your full pushing strength. The scapular push strengthens the base from which we push, and as breakers, we push all the time, so we need to get this right. There are short videos out there already, but without the details that you need, you'll potentially get it wrong, overload your joints even more, and waste your energy. Let's take your pushing to the next level. Hey, I'm Coach Tom, and welcome to Breaking S&C, the scapular push. If we get this stronger, then our shoulders can handle more and are less likely to get injured. The more strength your shoulder stabilizers have, the more you can maximize the force your bigger muscles can create. So, the outline of this video. First is going to be the mistakes I see. Then I'm going to show you the exercise with my method, justify it, and show you how to make it easier and harder to make the exercise right for you. These are the scapular bones. There are a bunch of muscles which cause scapular protraction, and they are highlighted here. So I'm going to be covering the horizontal, but touch on the vertical scapular pushes as well, as the principles are very similar. The basic movement for a scapular push is to put your hands on the floor, round your hips, and bring your shoulders down and then push away, just with your shoulders. For vertical, go into a folded pike position. Hips should be neutral now, not rounded. Bring your shoulders down and then push away. But obviously the movements are more complicated than that. So let's go over the mistakes. The main mistake, resting through your joint. To be honest, the main purpose of the scapular push is to correct this mistake. The joints can't adapt to training like muscles can. They can only take so much before they break. Could be tomorrow, could be a year from now, but keep resting through your joints and injury is on its way. Even if you are not sagging, from experience, feeling the chest and front of the shoulder work will also load the joint, leading to pain. Additionally, having the neck work will raise the shoulder and lead to bones pinching on the joint. Another mistake is not engaging pelvic floor. This turns off the hips and makes you rely on your lower back to stabilize. Also, the muscles that keep the shoulders within their sockets cannot be activated completely. The hips connect to the lat, which holds the shoulder down, and we want that shoulder down. The pelvic floor ensures the hips are the anchor of support rather than the back joints. Using the back is a weak position for your core. It may potentially aggravate your back, and in my experience, will make the exercise transfer less to breaking. Going past flexibility. The scapular push is a very small movement, but you can go too far. See how I can go further, but I'm using other muscles apart from the subscapularis muscle to get me there. If you go too far and your neck is turning on, you can feel it in your chest and front of shoulder. This is a problem. Not engaging the finger flexors. This is a major problem I see 99% of people do in their pushing. The shoulder and wrist are very connected. If the finger flexors are not on, the shoulder is also not on properly as well. This is bad for two reasons. One, you are resting through the wrist like a stump. When you want to put massive force through the wrist, like in say, most power moves, it's all going through the wrist joint. Joints don't like it. This can also happen as the finger flexors fatigue as well. But also, if your shoulder stabilizers are not engaged properly, this can mean you are resting through your wrist as well. This can aggravate both the wrist and the shoulder and compromise the transfer of your workout to breaking. As breakers, we need very strong finger flexors. Lastly, choosing a progression which is too difficult for your uncompensated strength level. If the progression is too hard, it's impossible to engage the right muscles to begin with. You have to compensate, thus not really strengthening the stabilizers well, delaying your recovery, or possibly causing pain. Areas we need to focus on. To get over these mistakes, we want to focus on the shoulders, the neck, the hip unit, and the finger flexors. So firstly, the shoulders. This is the longest but most important section. When pushing, you have three stages: engaged at the top, engaged at the bottom, and off. Never be off. Off is resting through the joint capsule. So we always keep the right muscles engaged. The internal rotator cuff muscle located here. So we come down and push away only as far as the internal rotator cuff muscle will take us. This will allow our muscles to take the brunt of the weight, rather than the joints. Relying on the muscles rather than your joint will make the exercise harder, but safer. We also want to be controlling the scapular push down, rather than jolting down. The other muscles around the shoulder will work, but we do not want to feel them working. Bracing pelvic floor will stabilize your hips and shoulders and bring the tension of the exercise into the right muscles. If you haven't seen my pelvic floor video, it's integral to everything I do. If you're struggling with injuries, it's the secret and essential weapon of injury rehab, so please do watch that. Whilst trying to figure out the movement, if you feel it in the chest and shoulder, that's not too bad for now, but keep practicing. We want to eliminate that completely as soon as possible before you progress. If you do feel anywhere but here, it's likely you are either not bracing pelvic floor hard enough, you are fatiguing, you're out of your true flexibility range and so the pelvic floor lock can't turn on properly, or you've chosen a progression that's too difficult, so you have to compensate. Now, a very important point on pelvic floor as you get tired. The brain's job is to keep you alive. It will find a way to move, because evolutionary-wise, if you couldn't move, you would die. So when you are feeling it in the shoulder and elsewhere, those muscles are doing the work that the internal rotator cuff should be doing. If you're bracing pelvic floor and you feel the exercise in the right area, then great. However, as you start to become tired, the tension will start to move away from the right areas to the wrong ones, and your technique will start slipping. You may not feel tired, but if the tension is moving from the right areas to the wrong ones, this is a sign those right areas are fatiguing. The body will always try and find a way to move. So if you feel tension moving into other muscles, you have two choices. Either one, brace pelvic floor harder to bring the tension to the right areas again and grind 1 or 2 more reps out with good technique, or two, if that doesn't work, rest. You are done. So moving on to the hips. To get over this, we need to engage your pelvic floor whilst doing the scapular push. This should round your hips, rather than using your superficial muscles around your trunk like your six-pack muscles. And because we're engaging pelvic floor, we should be feeling the scapular push a little bit in the hips as well. All the actions together, bringing your shoulders down, pushing with the internal rotator cuff area, and pelvic floor, lock in your rib cage and scapula into an upper body unit. The unit is safe. It's the anchor. The arms move off the anchor, but the anchor itself does not move. Neck. If the shoulders are still raising, then to turn off the neck, we want to shrug the shoulders down into the same tension spot as this internal rotator cuff area. This is a minute movement, if any movement at all. But I have found, if your internal rotator cuff muscle is on enough, then the neck usually doesn't come on. Wrist. So to get over this, hands on the floor. Spread the fingers apart and engage them by pressing into the ground. This will then help protect the wrist more. Feel how it lights up your shoulder as well. Tempo. You'll probably have to move slow at the beginning to feel the right muscles working, but otherwise, the down for 2, 0 pause, and 1 on the way up should be fine for now, unless I've set out some different instructions on another program. If you're injured or have a recovering injury, you work to the capacity of your weaker side or injured area. If your left shoulder, elbow, or wrist is injured, it will give up before the other side. In my rehab series, I discuss the energy meter concept. Stop when that weaker side can't maintain good form anymore, or your injured area starts to feel vulnerable or painful. This will all ensure you do not compensate and go into pain. It will be a weird sensation, as the rest of your body will not feel tired, but that injured area will exhaust before everything else. At that point, you will need to rest. The harder you brace pelvic floor, the more you will bring tension back to the right muscles and away from pain. This will allow you to get more pain-free work in, especially as you get tired. To improve form, watch yourself in a mirror or film yourself. The reason this method of pushing is so important is that we want to take this not resting through the joints concept and apply it to braking. How you load the arm in the scapular push is how we should be loading our arm in every straight arm movement. You're still pushing in a flare, in a handstand. If you're not applying these principles into your dancing, then you're probably resting through the joints in that as well. Your brain is indiscriminate. It cannot tell between the forces you put on your body. Is it a heavy rucksack? Is it a push-up? Is it a handstand? It only knows force and its amount. Rest through your joints in any activity with force, and your brain and body will not care whether you class it as exercise or not. I know this is not a nice lesson to learn, but this is why I implore you to understand how to push properly and to understand how you should push in general. I know many of you will ignore this, but for those that are injured, hopefully this lesson sticks. So onto the regressions and progressions. The important thing to remember is the scapular push is a small movement, but it's still driven by muscles, and they can still get stronger. The more strength, the better, so never stop progressing. The other thing to mention is that you could probably get away with doing one horizontal or one vertical scapular push, rather than both. I would choose the one that more closely resembles what you're about to train. Doing pike push-ups, vertical. Doing push-ups or planche, horizontal. But ultimately, it's up to you. They both train similar areas. Here are the ways to build this move. You may be surprised how much you need to regress in order to feel the internal rotator cuff muscle. The methods may be different, but the principles will be the same across all variations. Horizontal. This is the easiest version and a good place to start practicing. Go on hands and knees under hips, and start the scapular push. The next progression is to extend your feet out. Go to a mirror or film yourself to make sure your back doesn't arch. Once you can do two-armed fall, we then want to progress. This will be the one a lot of people stay on for a while, as you can make it fairly easy or pretty hard. Have one hand on the floor and the other on fingers. You are shifting into one hand, but you are taking as much weight off as you need to with the other so that you can complete the set with good form. You can then progress this by just taking less and less weight off with the other hand until you are one-handed. Now, a common issue is that people progress too early. Their body twists, and so their core is now off. Get the pelvic floor on and take as much weight off as you need to so that your hips are aligned. To progress the one-arm scapular push, you can simply add more weight. Tie it around your chest and then go for it. The other way is to raise your feet, but obviously even in this way, you will need to add weight eventually. I would only start building this when you can do one-arm scapular pushes. Still have the same areas engaged and only go as far as the internal rotator cuff muscle will take you. With your feet on a box or a raised surface and hips high, perform the scapular push. Once the piked one is fine, you can then transfer this to the handstand, again engaging the same under the armpit area. Go against the wall so you don't need to worry about balancing. Once two arms becomes easy, you can then start shifting over to one side and take weight off with the other hand. To progress, take less and less weight off and do not neglect pelvic floor. From experience, you will always have to use the other hand, even if it's just for stability. After the one-arm handstand scapular push, the next progression is to just keep adding weight. This one is tricky, but it's definitely doable. This is why I like one-armed rather than two-arm weighted, as otherwise you need to have a lot of weight up there. A great alternative is to do the scapular push on dip bars or raised boxes. This is a safe way to really load up the scapular push. Again, principles should be the same, feeling it under the armpit and the internal rotator cuff. There are lots of possible variations of the scapular push using different equipment. They are all fine, just as long as you adhere to the muscle engaging principles I have laid out. If you come to this video through a rehab or strength program video, follow the sets and reps I've outlined there. Otherwise, do a regression that allows you to hit 8 to 15 reps for 1 or 2 sets. Once you can hit 15, make it harder and go down to 8 reps. This is a prehab exercise, so stick these into your warm-up before breaking and working out. If you don't have an injury, 1 set will still be good and will prime the body for bigger movements. 2 sets are good for when you're getting over an injury, but you should also see a good benefit off 1 set of scapular pushes as long as you're doing the rotator cuff as well. Anyways, that was the video. If you found this useful, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to put out more videos on different injuries and how to strengthen in the best way. Also, please give your feedback in the comments below. Ask any questions. Let me know what wasn't clear for you, as I'm aware this is all new information, and it will help make my message even better. Otherwise, until next time, train hard and stay safe.